Are the 49ers the favorites in the NFC with Brock Purdy as QB1?
I think they are. I think right now going into the field here, the 49ers are my pick to get through the NFC. They're playing really well, and Purdy's playing really well. He deserves all the credit in the world. I can't imagine anybody like his parents included, could have anticipated that he was going to play this well before he made his debut when Garoppolo went down.
The team most people were touting as the favorites in the NFC, and until recently, and Jeff, I've heard others echo your sentiment when it comes to the 49ers, but it was the Eagles. First of all, did you ever buy they were as good as the record said that they were? And secondly, what's not gone as well for the Eagles here the last few weeks that it seems fewer people believe in them?
I think it's just the injury to Hurts, and there's obviously the layoff element, and then, he came back a little bit. Now going into the bye, how are they going to look? This is a team that is very different from the one that made it to won the Super Bowl 5 years ago. So, they're largely unproven, and it's hard to predict how a team that hasn't really had a lot of success together is going to come out of a first-round bye and, playing a team that's feeling itself off of its own playoff win. So I think that's all it is, but they are really good. They absolutely are. I mean, their offensive system is incredibly dynamic. Hurts is playing out of his mind. They've got some outstanding skill position players, and their defense has gotten really overlooked because their offense is so good. So it's a very balanced team. I'm just curious how they're going to look coming off of the layoff.
This week, Jeff, and we're with Jeff Howe, Burt Breer mentioned the idea of Jimmy G going to the Raiders. And I know earlier, last week, Ross Tucker and others mentioned Brady possibly going to the Raiders. How would you peg the odds for who would be QB1 for the Raiders in 2023?
I would start with Tom Brady, and I think their backup plan is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. And if all else fails, try to move up the board and get one of those top three quarterbacks, assuming they like at least a couple of them enough to make such an aggressive move. But, I mean, the whole Derek Carr thing, they telegraphed it. They're obviously moving on from him, which is fine. I think that's probably the right decision. And you can get some draft collateral in return for him. So that's going to be a worthwhile move. They're going to have about $60 million in cap space after moving on from Carr. That's going to give them all the ammunition they need to go after Brady, assuming he wants to keep playing. And I really think, we've talked about the Niners and their potential pursuit of Brady, but I think the way that Brock Purdy is playing, along with the investment of Trey Lance, you should be pretty happy with bringing those two guys into camp next year. You don't need to shell out for a big-time veteran contract like you would with Brady. So I just think the only potential competition would be if Sean Payton takes one of these openings and can lure Brady in with him. Otherwise, I really have to believe the Raiders are the big-time favorites. Now, if Brady wants to retire, or if he surprises everybody, or I should say surprises me and returns to Tampa, then you move on to Garoppolo, and I think that's a pretty solid upgrade as well.
While we're talking about decisions the Raiders have to make this offseason, Josh Jacobs says he wants to stay a Raider. Josh McDaniels said he wants to keep Josh Jacobs around. But that's what you'd expect both those guys to say with cameras and microphones in their face. Do you believe that feeling is mutual between those two parties and Josh Jacobs will be back in a Raiders uniform next year?
I think the franchise tag is a really worthwhile option because I think that gets them at about $10 million for the year. And when you look at the running back market, I wish I wrote about this a few weeks back. I think it's like that top tier of guys, like 6 to 8 players, make $12 million plus per year, somewhere in the range of 12 and 15. So if you're talking 10 million or 11 million, whatever it happens to be, that's still, it's kind of a bargain for the guy who led the league in yards this year. And then there's a huge drop off when you get below that $12 million tier. The next group of guys is in the like $6 to $7 to $8 million range. And, I think looking at Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels and kind of relating that to the Patriots philosophy, which is very much against giving running backs massive contracts, I think that's going to be a really fascinating story. But if it is, assuming I have the $10 million figure correct on the running back potential franchise tag, I think you have to go with that and then see if you can work out something long term.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic. He's on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, what happens with Aaron Rodgers this offseason?
Well, I really thought going into Sunday night that he was going to come back, but really watching his actions and listening to him speak, I'm not as sure about that. I think it's probably the Packers or nobody. I also thought it was interesting that he wanted to hear what the Packers wanted to do with him. If the Packers came to him and said, hey, we want to go with Jordan Love and trade you, how would you react to that? And he didn't look like he wanted to dismiss it. He didn't look like he was all in on that idea. So my gut tells me he goes back to Green Bay, but that's like, I don't know, 65%. Then I would say 25% retires, 10% plays elsewhere. Hopefully that adds up to 100.
It was close. If it wasn't, it was close, Jeff. The coaching carousel has started to spin. Does this all start with Sean Payton? Because it seems like already the teams that have openings have expressed interest in him. Is everybody going to see where Sean Payton lands before they make their hires?
I think so. And I think it'd be organizational malpractice to not at least see if Sean Payton is interested in interviewing with you if you have an opening. So Denver made that move. I think it's a three-headed monster, really. It's Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and DeMeco Ryans. And then you can maybe throw Dan Quinn in there, too. I mean, those are the four biggest names. And then, you look at Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. There are some other guys who are going to get some really solid looks. We'll see if they're comfortable. I don't think there's any really great jobs right now. So I don't know how much Sean Payton is going to be really interested in taking any of these five openings. He told me back in, I think it was like early November, he's not going to just take a job just to take a job. He has to feel like everybody is in harmony, from ownership to the GM and other high-ranking front office decision makers. He has to be aligned with their vision. He's not going anywhere dysfunctional, so you can take the Colts off the board. And I think Denver's an interesting one. I think, Denver might be the best opening, depending on how he feels about Russell Wilson. And I think watching Wilson the last couple of weeks without Nathaniel Hackett, he does seem salvageable. But my biggest concern there is when Greg Penner, the CEO, came out after firing Hackett and said the next coach will answer to me and not George Payton. And that just doesn't make any sense. That type of leadership structure doesn't often work. So how does Sean Payton feel about that? And then you look at, spin it forward. If he doesn't want any of these five jobs, I think the next three most appealing options are the Rams, if Sean McVay leaves, the Chargers, if, let's say, things don't work out with Staley, I don't know, a year from now or something like that. I'm higher on Staley than a lot of people, so I think he's probably going to be safe for a while. And then there's the Cowboys with his interest in, or his relationship with Jerry Jones. And I'm not going to rule out the Cowboys being eliminated early and Jerry Jones moving on from McCarthy. So that job could open up as early as, next week. I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Jeff, we appreciate your time as always, man. We'll have a lot to get to next week once we get the playoffs this weekend. Have a good rest of the weekend, my man.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.
All right, there goes Jeff Howe from The Athletic on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop.